Yeah. I will share with you my PowerPoint presentation, and I will briefly explain to you how I'm going to present my presentation. I will divide it into three main parts, and the first part will be dedicated to explain how youth identified themselves in the context of Nineveh before Daesh from 2003 to 2014. And I will, in a bit, I will explain these key developments. And the second part, I will explain the changes occurring in the perceptions of youth towards their identity formation, participation in civil society, and their perceptions of ethno-religious identities in their own community. And in the last part, I will dedicate this part to propose some policy recommendations, which we believe should be pursued and promoted to consolidate the positive trends or changes happening in youth's conditions or in youth's perceptions. I will share with you the screen now. Yeah, can you all see the screen? Yeah, very good. This presentation is part of a research project produced by the Italian organization called UPP, within the Nineveh Return Program of the Malteser International, funded by the German Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ. So just for you to know where we come from. In this slide, I will briefly share with you the methodology, how we collected data for this report. And it's really important here that the objective of our research is really to explore and to provide empirical analysis of the changes occurring in the young people's identity formation and their perceptions towards ethno-religious identities, and above all, their participation in civil society as a peaceful response to their disappointment and anger with the existing authorities. This is critical in the history of this part of the country. Our key statement is the following: is for the people who follow the events in Nineveh, in northern part of Iraq, it's very obvious to know that ethno-religious identities are still central to how people formulate and identify their identities and behaviors and actions in your identity. However, there is a trend there's a parallel trend among the youth. There is an emerging youth activism and participation in civil society. And now there are more young people identified themselves based on more Iraqi national identity than subnational ethno-religious identities. This is, in my view, this is a historic development in Iraq. Why this is important? Just briefly, let me explain to you which context we are talking about. Nineveh is a governorate in northern part of Iraq. Because it is where all of the ethno-religious groups live in this part of the country. The Kurds, Arabs, both Shia and Sunni, Turkmens, both Shia and Sunni, Christians, Assyrians, Shabaks, Yazidis, and other smaller social and linguistic groups. So it's really understanding Nineveh is a way to understand Iraq. Changing this context, in my view, is also a way to change the whole country. And it's also, Nineveh is also important for regional dynamics. Turkey has a military base in Nineveh. There are also a variety of non-state armed groups, including the Kurdistan Workers' Party and the variety of Shia armed groups. So it's a very complex region. And importantly, there are districts within Nineveh disputed between the two governments, the Kurdistan regional government and the Iraqi government. So really, a little Iraq, and understanding Nineveh is really important to understand what we can do for the country for peace building and state building in Iraq. And this new trend among the young people in this region who identified themselves based more on Iraqi national identity above ethno-religious identity, and their desire to work in civil society is as a major development in post-Daesh Nineveh and also Iraq. And in this slide, let me briefly show you how was the context prior to Daesh, the emergence of Daesh in 2014. From 2003 to 2014, Nineveh, this region, this complex region, this diverse region, witnessed the rise of divisive narratives around religions and ethnicity, creating a deep polarized environment in which youth, young people were affected and radicalized towards violence and extremism. And Nineveh was a deeply polarized region prior to 2014, and young people were specifically affected by the polarization, ethno-religious polarization the region faced prior to 2014. I'm not going to really provide more details about how the context was. All of the details are in the report, which we will share and publish soon. I will share with you all, but it's the key here is that the key statement is that before 2014, young people in Nineveh, there was no youth activism in civil society, and the ethno-religious identification was central in how young people identified their identity. And this is a critical barrier to peace building and state building in this part of the country. So because it promoted subnational identities at the expense of the common Iraqi national identity, which is central for creating state building and peace building in the country. And also the insecurity the region faced in this period deteriorated the economic situations, the low levels of school attendance, graduation, and career, job and economic opportunities for the young generation. And in this figure, you will see that prior to 2014, religion was central and played a central role in the young people's life. 86% of the participants viewed religion was central in their identity formation. In the other graph, we are witnessing a change in the importance of religion in identity formation of young people in Nineveh. And that was the context from 2003 to 2014. It was characterized by a deep polarization based on ethno-sectarian and religious identity. After 2014, we are witnessing a major positive change. What is the positive change? Our data in our report indicates a change in young people's self-identification. Sorry, just let me just. Sorry, dear, it was another power problem. But yeah, and this is really, I want to focus my presentation more here on the changes happening in this region after Daesh. Now, there are more young people identify themselves as Iraqi national identity, and they focus and they emphasize more on civicness, and it can be translated into Madaniya in Arabic. So, and this is again a major development regarding identity formation among the young people in post-Daesh Nineveh. Yeah, let me show you these two interesting figures. The majority of the people believe that their perceptions of religion changed after 2014. We asked them what was the nature of the change. The young generation believe that they have become more moderate in their perceptions and views of religion in this period. Similarly, in these two figures, there are important data how young people, their identity was based before and after Daesh. You see an interesting change here is the following. If you look at this, if you look at the Iraqi national identity, only 23% of the respondents, young respondents, based their identity on Iraqi national identity prior to 2014, while after 2014, now this number increased to 60, to 30. So this is, we see this as a major positive change in how people in such complex and diverse communities try to create a common narrative based on more national identity than their ethno-religious identity. Here there is interesting data in this figure, and this shows how people viewed each other in these different communities. And regarding, I mean, let me read this question. Would you have had a problem marrying a partner who belongs to other ethno-religious background? We see a change in how people view really partnership and marriage with people from other ethno-religious community. This is another change we can witness it among the young generation, among young people in this region. Their perception has also changed. Now they have more positive perceptions towards other groups in Nineveh among the young generation. I think all these data, all these figures tell us there is a new trend among this generation. I will repeat my words and my statements. They view religion as less important in their identity information. They have positive perceptions toward other ethno-religious communities in their governorate, in their region, and also they have more demands towards socio-economic. They have more socio-economic and political demands than traditionally religiously framed or motivated demands. So all these changes require a new governance, a new response to how we deal with this generation. And I can tell you that this is not unique. This is not only happening in the context of Nineveh. This is also a response to a larger youth activism happening in Iraq, also in the region. More young generation, more young people now demand socio-economic changes and based on their, rather than just framing their demands based on ethno-sectarian identities. So the key to state here is that a new governing model is required to deal with these changes, to invest in these positive changes happening among the young generation. So based on these data and statements and analysis, we are really proposing two major policy recommendations. And it's there's a very good literature available now in Iraq on what should be done, what are the problems, what are the gaps, what are the changes, what are the problems between communities, within communities. I think it's now the time to really think about what we can do, who can do that, who can do the changes, who can lead the changes. So there is a very strong, solid analysis and evidence and data to support the changes that are, that the young generation, the young people demanding in Iraq and also in Nineveh. And the first policy recommendation that we would like to propose in this report, in this presentation, is a more youth-driven approach to peace building. If you map the existing initiatives in Nineveh, peace building and social cohesion initiatives in Nineveh, you can find that the programs are designed more to bridge the communities, the ethno-religious communities with each other, such as Shabaks and Christians in the district of Hamdaniya or Tilkeh, for example, or Yazidis and Sunni Arabs in the district of Sinjar, for example. What we argue is beyond that, deepening and widening the peace building initiatives to deal with the individuals, at the family level, at the individual level. So it's no longer just between communities, between these major components of Nineveh. So Nineveh requires a new peace building approach beyond the community levels, going deeper to individual levels within each of these communities. And we really recommend international, local and international civil society actors to scale up their efforts and initiatives and to engage more youth in designing and implementing their programs. And above all, to provide more capacity building opportunities. So this young generation, the youth in Nineveh can become a bridge between civil society and local and national government authorities. So the whole point of this recommendation is that this is the Nineveh moment. More young people demand better socioeconomic opportunities and also identify themselves as part of something broader that has something in common that can bring all these communities together. This is the moment. And as from the very beginning, I said, in parallel, there are other groups who really promote ethno-sectarian and religious identities. So we have to invest heavily in this positive trend happening among the youth. Otherwise, they will become vulnerable to the existing programs or projects, promoted by certain armed actors trying to engage young people, trying to militarize young people in for their own political interests. So this is the moment this is not the moment to leave the region. This is the moment to deepen and widen peace building and social cohesion efforts. And also, the second policy recommendation is the following. Really, Nineveh needs its own action plan and to develop its own action plan. And because Nineveh from the beginning, I said, it's a little Iraq. And if we succeed in Nineveh, and then we can really widen the initiatives and also the programs and the framework to include other parts of Iraq. So if we succeed in investing and promoting and consolidating the youth participation and activism in peaceful civil society, and also their desire to identify themselves as a national, based on common national identity, and also, moving away from ethno-sectarian grievances, focusing more on socio-economic demands and opportunities. I think developing an action plan at the provincial level, at the level of Nineveh, I think is a policy objective, is a policy recommendation, should be promoted and developed and supported by the existing international and local international organizations, as well as the government authorities. Why? I repeat my word, this is the Nineveh moment. And this youth activism can be invested and can be supported to support the peace building process. And the lack of this youth activism in the past, prior to 2014, was central in the failure of so many initiatives by local and international organizations and actors. So this is the moment to invest more, and also to extend their programs and projects in this part of the country. I will stop from here, and I'm happy to answer your question and also provide more details, more context to these big statements. What do we mean by young people in Nineveh? Which community, which group, with ethno-religious young people we are talking about? So I'm really happy to provide more insights and context and also numbers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kamaran, for this wonderful presentation. And if I might just agree with what you just said, very bold statements that you made. When I read your paper, I was also quite taken aback by some of your findings, that the youth are less religious, that they're holding on to a more Iraqi identity. So I can imagine there will be a lot of questions around that. To the audience, just to make you aware, if you have a question, I can see some people already doing that perfectly. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a reactions button, and if you press that, you can raise your hand. That would be the easiest way for us to enter into discussion. So the first, I leave the question over to Johannes Eckstein, who has his hand raised. Maybe just introduce yourself with one sentence, so Kamaran also knows a little bit your...
Yeah, hello, it's Johannes Eckstein. I'm a master's student at Humboldt University, and I have been last year to the Kurdistan region and worked together with Sarah on the Malteser project. And I have a technical question regarding the data. What you showed in these pie charts, this, I guess, is the results from the quantitative survey. And I wanted to ask, because you mentioned in the beginning that you used qualitative and quantitative data, did you do the qualitative interviews first and then develop your quantitative survey questionnaire from the insights from the qualitative research, or the other way around, that you started with quantitative and saw this is interesting, I want to dig deeper into it, and then did the qualitative research after the quantitative? Was this clear? I don't know.
Yeah, it's very clear.
Thank you.
Sarah, shall I answer directly or wait for the questions?
No, please. At this stage, we have a good amount of time, so please answer directly.
This is a very important question. Actually, as for obvious reasons, COVID and restrictions, etc., it was extremely hard to collect data in this context. And in addition to COVID restrictions, there's also security problems, you know. So most of these territories that we work at controlled by different security armed groups. So we require different, permissions or, techniques in order to move around and also interview people. I think we initially planned to conduct the focus group discussions and interviews and also survey in parallel. But we found that the survey fieldwork was extremely difficult. So we started with the focus group discussions, with the interviews. Then we developed an online, application to do the survey. However, we found that this is not really a good way to collect some representative data, because there may be some people with no access to the internet or for other reasons, concerns. So we created a team in 5 different locations in 5 different districts within Nineveh in order to present a representative data based on ethno-religious communities. So survey in person in these different 5 locations. Ideally, actually, it could have been better to do the survey first and then validate the data and discuss it in focus group discussions, and also try to dig deeper in qualitative data. But in this context, we just couldn't do this simply.
Thank you so much, Kamaran. I have Sura now, and after Sura, I take Dr. Asma.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Zor spas, Kamaran.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to see that youth Iraqis are finally looking at their national identity and not in divisions. I was wondering, why do you think this change happened?
Yeah.
Because this change happened, because for me, it's more like the recent protests, the politicians who exploited the religion, and also the shock of ISIS in the region that made this identity, shift. And also my second question would be, how is that identity interlinked with people who identify as people from Kurdistan region, which is still an ongoing issue with the national identity, and from those from Iraq as Iraqis? Yeah. Please.
Again, very important, critical questions. Actually, in this report, we identified 3 main possible explanations for this change in youth's identity formation. First, the brutality of ISIS and the destruction of this group brought to Nineveh in the name of religion. And if you just visit this region, you feel the destruction and also the brutality this group brought to this region. And for many, that was a response to the violence and to the brutality this group brought to the region in the name of the religion. In addition to this, Daesh was just part of the larger environment created after 2003 in Nineveh. More Sunni communities rejected the new political process, the new political order in the country, and the insecurity destroyed economic sphere and economic opportunities, destroyed social and family structures. So this environment allowed the emergence, the arrival of several extremist groups, and later Daesh. So for all these years, from 2003 to 2014, so these groups really destroyed Nineveh and the region in the name of religion. That's the first. The second, actually, again, and from 2003 to 2014, it was almost impossible for an international NGO to work inside Mosul. to have an office to support the young generation in Mosul. And it was almost impossible for the local people to work with these organizations. So they could be easily defined as working for, as agents, working for the occupation, etc. So there was lack of civil society in Mosul to promote these ideas and changes. As you know, the majority of the population of this province, and including the city of Mosul, all displaced to different locations, including the Kurdistan region. It's where they received training and education in the camps, and especially women, young women, really for the first time received education and capacity building in the camps. So there was a new horizon of opportunities found, ironically, in displacement. So displacement really played an important role in creating this sentiment or raising awareness among the young people in Nineveh across the communities. And the third reason is really, as I said, is a response to a broader problem, structural problem in the Middle East, not only in Iraq. So there is a deep problem, social contract problem between the young generation and the existing authorities. So the existing authorities frame and label and produce their policies based on ethno-sectarian religious identities, while more young generation demands more socio-economic opportunities. So Nineveh is also part of this broader change happening in the country. Regarding Kurdistan, this is a very, very important question, because in my view, since 1991, in my view, Kurdistan is a non-state nation. It has developed its own identity for more than 3 decades. So really, like, the people in this part of the country do not really respond, significantly to the changes happening in the other parts of Iraq. I can give you an example. When there was a protest in Baghdad, people in this part of the country were more interested in the events in northern part of Syria, when Turkey was, going and intervening in this part. So really, still really not, identity-wise, this part is not really well connected to the other parts of the country. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kamaran. And now Dr. Asma will ask a question.
السلام عليكم. دكتورة أسماء، صحفية وإعلامية. طبعا أنا ما عندي سؤال لأستاذ كاميران، لكن عندي تعليق على اللي قاله، إنه الموصل أنا بخبرتي، لأن أنا كنت مدربة تنمية بشرية بالموصل من 2003 إلى حد ما صارت أعداد داعش انسحبت. وراء أحداث داعش ما تابعت العمل، لكن قبل داعش أنا كنت أقود المنظمات، وكونا أكثر من منظمة شبابية، وأيضا يعني وصل يعني تكوين للمنظمات إلى القرى والأرياف، وقمنا مشاريع دعم للشباب. يعني أتصور أنه العينة اللي أخذها أستاذ كاميران كانت تفتكر أنه يأخذ العينة، يعني يوسع من عينته لكي يصل إلى حقيقة العمل. الشباب كان كله يعني تقريبا أنا بس اللي وياي كانوا بحدود 2000-3000 شاب يعملون، يعني وهذا مو فد رقم قليل بالنسبة إذا ردنا نقيسه مع شباب الموصل. وأنا كنت أعمل على 3 يعني أقضية، وبالإضافة إلى المركز. فهذا إنه العينة كان المفروض يعني يتوسع بها الباحث ويقدم لنا العينة يعني بصورة صحيحة، يقدم لنا إياها، لأن الشباب بهيك حالة دا يظلم حقهم قبل 2014. يعني أنا من 2003 دا أنا عملت معاهم، وكان أكو شباب معايا يعمل، وأيضا كونا منظمات بدأت تتعامل ويا المنظمات الدولية. هاي نقطة. النقطة الثانية الخلل اللي صار داخل الشباب واللي كسر من همتهم هو كما حضرتك تفضلت انه هم كانوا رافضين لاسلوب الحكومة اللي كانت متبعته، فهذا هو اللي سبب او قلل من اختلاط الشباب مع المنظمات الدولية. ليش؟ لأن على اعتبار أنه الحكومة هي تابعة للمنظمات، يعني تابعة للغرب، وهو كانت هاي نقطة الخلاف اللي بيني وبينهم أيضا، أنه إحنا كمنظمات مجتمع مدني المفروض بينا نعمل إحنا للمجتمع، ما لنا علاقة بالحكومة. فقدرت أغير من مفهوم الشباب، لكن بعد أحداث داعش، من صارت أحداث داعش قلت لك يعني أنا بالنسبة لي انسحبت، لكن أكو منظمات بقت تعمل ولا زالت تعمل، وهي منظمات شبابية وعندي معرفة بهم انه شباب لهم كان دور، خصوصا بوقت داعش، يعني كانوا يعملون لكن بالخفاء. وشكرا لكم.
Thank you. Two questions. First, on the methodological side of how we collected data. Actually, we have a whole team based inside each of these locations in Nineveh province, including the city and district of Mosul. And I'm also originally from this province. So, and also the whole team, we were based, in these different districts in province. So when I say there was the whole environment was difficult for civil society between 2003 to 2014. I think this was confirmed by most of the civil society representatives and managers and leaders in Nineveh. And I didn't want to say that there was no local organization because we did an initiative mapping of the organizations working in Mosul from 2003 to 2014 and later. There were, but the whole environment was not really conducive to civil society. And for the obvious reason you also highlighted for the, because the whole region, especially the Sunni Arabs and Sunnis within Shabaks, within Turkmens, were refusing or rejecting the new political process. So they could easily connect the existing or the international organizations with the new occupation or with the new invading forces in the country. So that was the rhetoric, that was the discourse. So it was really hard for local civil society to emerge, to consolidate. There were trainings, there were opportunities, there were courses, etc. But here I'm talking about the whole environment, and also I compare it with the post-Daesh environment. Now, most of the international NGOs easily move from Baghdad and Erbil to Mosul, to other districts. They have offices, they have branches, they have local partners, and including this project that we are working on. So the whole environment is different. And I argue that this has been essential in changing many of these perceptions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asma, for the comment, and Kamaran for the response. I have a question from Seta that she's written to me, so I'll read it out for you. Were the youth of all denominations equally responding to the questions in the same way? For example, in the percentages represented consisting of Kurds, Yazidis, Christians, etc.
Yeah. Another interesting question. Actually, because for obvious reasons, COVID-related and security-related reasons, we couldn't really have a larger, sample in the survey. So it was really hard to, disaggregate data based on ethno-religious identity. But in the qualitative interviews and also in the FGDs, it was clear that different communities, responded or reacted to the questions, to the themes differently. I will give you an example. there is a community in Nineveh called Shabaks. And there are Shia Shabaks and there are Sunni Shabaks. And after 2017, new armed groups, Shia armed groups created in Nineveh Plains within Shabaks. And some of them are aligned with another regional player, which is Iran. So religion is so important in the emergence and consolidation of these armed groups. And these armed groups have also significantly affected the young generation, the young people within their own community. So within the Shia Shabaks, there is still attachment to the religious, sectarian religious identity in their formation. But if you study or if you analyze, explain the conditions within the Yazidis, and it's different. Now more Yazidi identify, they have less attachment to the existing religious authorities within their own community. So in the case of Shabaks, armed groups militarized the community, and also because of all of the problems, there was no job opportunity. So for many young people within the Shabak community, joining these armed groups has become a necessary way to get a job, to get a salary. So there are different dynamics within ethno-religious communities in Nineveh, but overall, in general, there are positive perceptions because as the data and also interviews and survey objectives showing that, especially within the Sunni Arab community, which are the majority in Mosul and other districts. So yes, I agree, different ethno-religious communities have different own reactions and responses to the changes happening in this context.
Great, thanks, Kamaran. I hope that you will allow me a question and then I will take the final question.
Of course.
I actually have many questions, but that might be for another time. But I wanted to ask you about the role of religious leaders, because that's an important subject for this workshop. When I was in Iraq, we were working with an organization and they wanted to have an activity between the youth and the religious leaders. And they had to change this activity because they realized that there was actually a lack of trust between those youth and the older generations, including the religious leaders who they believed to be out of touch with their needs and also potentially corrupt. So I wanted to hear from you if you have any data on the value or the trust they have in religious leaders, or where you would see also the role of religious leaders for these youth.
Yeah, and I really want to make one thing very clear, one distinction. We should make clear that there is a difference between young people's personal commitment to religion as a belief, as practicing religion, and also their perceptions to three things: religious identity, religious discourse, and also the religious authorities. I think what we are witnessing, which I believe it's a positive change, is less attachment to the religious discourse, to the religious authorities, to the religious identity in Nineveh. And also after 2017, in our interviews and also in survey, there is in the report, there are two figures: young people's view of the speeches of the religious leaders. Now more people believe that they have become more moderate comparing to the pre-2014 phase. So there is also a change in the speeches and also in the views of the religious leaders. One thing is very important. In addition to the call for common national identity, there is also a call for more rule of law as the basis for governance. So rule of law in this part of the country, Nineveh, just like the rest of the country, is traditionally a tribal religious society. So where tribes and religious authorities, were very powerful and central. So a call for rule of law is also a way of, of these existing authorities. So measuring young people's personal commitment to religion is one thing, and their relations with the religious authorities and religious institutions is another thing, which is the most important one in my view.
Yes, thank you so much for clarifying that. We have time for one more question, so I see that Johannes Eckstein has his hand raised. Please go ahead.
So it's not Johannes Eckstein, it's me, Yasmin Mausef. So first, thank you very much for this very informative presentation you gave to us. My question is, I would say maybe it's not a part of your research, but can you describe the relationship between youth and older generations in this situation out of your perspective, maybe?
Yeah, no, it's a very relevant question to our report and our project. In general, I would say that young people are becoming less dependent on the older structures in their society, including the religious authorities, tribal leaders, etc. And in my personal view, why this happened? Because I saw the displacement. I saw the tribal leaders were displaced with their own dependents in the same camp. So the entire power relations and power structures collapsed in Nineveh after 2014. So no longer these people could claim or position themselves as more powerful in their relations with the younger generation after 2014. I saw them in the camps, in each camps in the country. So they are becoming less dependent on the older generations. And traditionally and typically the answer or the response of the older generation, because we interviewed the tribal leaders as well, that this generation lacks of respect to these institutions, and some go beyond that. They believe that the international organizations are behind these changes in the perceptions of the young generation towards existing religious and tribal and community leaders.
Well, thank you so much, Kamaran. And I think our session is drawing to a close. I think it's been fantastic how you've been able to really show us the complexity of the situation and also the different nuances we have to keep in mind. I have a lot of questions still and a lot to think about, as I'm sure many of you do, but this is maybe for further discussions another time. But thank you for your time, your efforts, and explaining these things. And thank you to all the participants for being here and engaging with us. We will have a 5-minute break now, and the final panel is going to begin at 3:15. And any of the organizers, is there anything that you need to announce before we say goodbye? No, I think we stay in this session. It's the same.
Sarah, just one thing. I will share with the organizers of this conference the final report, the final version of our report. Then we can share it with the participants.
That sounds great. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Kamaran. Thank you, everyone, and see you back here in 5 minutes.